Hi, welcome to episode 33 of Think Like a Hacker, the podcast about WordPress, security, and innovation. This week we talked to David Jardin from Cologne, Germany. We met up with David at WordCamp Europe and talked to him about security. David heads the security strike team for Joomla and receives security reports for that content management system. We talked about the importance of a working proof of concept and how it speeds the patch process, and what's coming in Joomla 4 with code signing, something that recently was added to WordPress. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah, so my name is David. I'm from Cologne, Germany, and I'm the head of the Joomla security strike team. That's my full title. Requires a rather long business card, but yes, that's what I do on a volunteer base.
Wow, cool. So the Joomla security strike team.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing that?
I'm involved for about 5 years now, and I'm the team lead for I think a little more than 3. I kind of stumbled into that team by reporting a number of issues, and then kind of switched sides, and now I'm part of the team. It's good fun. It's a challenging job, a job that you can hardly plan, because lots of the stuff that we get in terms of reports. We don't have a schedule for this. People just report stuff whenever they like, and you have to take a look at it right away. There are no planned times for this. But I really enjoy it. I meet a lot of people, get in touch with people from all over the globe. And I learn a ton of things. Security world is busy.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess I became aware of the Joomla security strike team a few years ago. I think there was a vulnerability, and we might have covered it just as kind of a public service announcement because our space is WordPress. And at that point, I noticed the name and so on. But that strike team and that strike team concept, how long has that been around for, and when did they come up with it?
I think for a little more than 10 years now.
Okay.
In the beginning, core security was also covered by the core maintainer team. But at some point in time, that core team grew bigger and bigger. And it kind of makes sense to just outsource it into a separate team to keep it as small as possible, because the nature of information that we're working with is one that shouldn't run into bigger circles. It's secret, so to say, until stuff is published. And so since then it's a separate security team. I think just like the WordPress community has its security team too. It's a shared concept that I know from all major CMS, more or less, in that way.
Okay, and I guess the confidentiality that you were talking about is that you would get a vulnerability reported confidentially to you.
Exactly.
That's a 0 day at that point, and you can't really let that get out, because at that point there's like that sensitive time window when if it gets out, people can actually use it to actively exploit sites that where there's no patch available even yet, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about what your workflow is when you get a report? How does that work?
We're running a ticket system for this kind of stuff, and the very first action is take a look at the report if you're actually able to reproduce it. So is that a valid report? And if it's a valid one, you need to triage, is it a critical one? In that case, ring the alarm bell, or is it more like a non-critical stuff, like read-only, ACL violation, these kind of things that don't require an immediate release. And a special role comes to real 0 days, so vulnerabilities that are already actively exploited in the wild, even before they are reported confidentially. Luckily, we only had one of those cases in the last 12 years. That was a busy afternoon.
Yeah. When was that?
That was in late 2015.
Okay.
It actually wasn't a Joomla issue, but an issue in PHP session deserialization method. And it was exploitable with Joomla, but not a Joomla issue at core. And we got aware of this because the hosting company contacted us with suspicious log files. We were really lucky in this case because the exploit vector within Joomla was to append a malicious HTTP user agent, and that's obvious in log files.
Right.
So
it's one of the things that
exactly.
Apache default log file stores.
Exactly.
The user agent. Right?
Same does Nginx. So that really hit them in the face, and we were able to track that down rather fast. With the time window between first notification from the web host until patch release was about 12 hours.
Oh wow!
So we really shipped that out fast, but still we had a couple of 10,000 sites being hacked because it was that easy. One single GET request, and you had a remote code execution.
Wow, yeah, that's nuts. So I mean, what was that like for you guys? I guess you are coding under pressure, knowing that every additional minute that you're coding, sites are being hacked. How does that feel?
It was a lot of pressure. We had some issues reproducing it in the first place because it was a PHP issue, and that PHP issue was fixed 6 months ago. And the majority of our team members was already running that patched PHP version. So no matter what we did, we couldn't reproduce the issue. I applied that malicious HTTP agent to my browser using an extension, tried it locally, didn't work, and by accident I browsed on a client side that was still running that old PHP version and triggered the exploit.
And you still had the user agent set
Exactly.
in your browser,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh wait, what just happened?
What-
I just accidentally hacked a client site,
Exactly.
but now I can repro it, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
And so once that was over and we were able to actually reproduce it, it was just a couple of minutes, or in all honesty, to get the patch out of the door. We have most of the process of building packages that's automated. That's not rocket science, but yeah, reproducing it, getting to that point, that was painful because we saw reports of hacked sites piling up in the support forums, and there was nothing we could do about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I have seen that pattern where much of the work, perhaps most of the work, and it seems like most of the work in this case goes into creating a repro, reproducing the bug or reproducing the vulnerability, so that you can know if you fixed it, and you can trace through the code and see what's causing it and create the fix in the first place. But I've spent a lot of effort doing that, and I guess that applies with a lot of bugs, is you need to reproduce it first. And I guess that really kind of points to why security companies publish proof of concept, because there's your repro, and if you can run the proof of concept against a firewall if you're trying to create protection, or against the software if you're trying to create a patch and so on. And I was just chatting with someone about it's one of the plugin vendors that's here at WordCamp EU, about the disclosure process. And I was explaining why researchers create proof of concepts. Because to an outsider it seems like, oh, you're just handing a hacker the tools to go and hack sites, but actually that's the repro, right? That's the reproduce. You're handing researchers and other vendors the ability to reproduce the bug, right?
Yeah, and that's really helpful. That speeds up our process immensely when we get a proper report with a proper POC. What really makes stuff a lot easier is, I don't know, a Postman example request, for example, with the payload. So you just have to point the URL to your test instance, hit submit, and the payload is fired. That stuff makes the job a lot easier. At least a lot easier than, hey, I found an XSS issue on that line, but no details about nothing. And that's what we see quite regularly.
And then you've got to sit down and you've got to write the repro yourself and so on. Yeah, interesting. Have your processes changed at all over the years in the security team? The way you do things, have you optimized anything at all?
We've optimized a number of things, and we've added one major feature, so to say, because Joomla, unlike WordPress, does not have automatic updates. So whenever Joomla does a critical security release, it's totally up to the user to apply stuff in that narrow time window before active exploits kick in. And in order to work around the user as the weakest part of the chain in that case, we're actively communicating WAF filter rules to large web hosting companies on a pretty large scale in the meantime. and that had a really huge impact on the amount of sites that are getting hacked. It's a great tool for the web hosts, great feedback from them. We don't communicate it too openly to the actual users to not give them that false feeling of being safe. But that was a great addition to our work, and it's very little work required on our side, maybe half an hour to get such a rule set up and running. We provide it normally as an example implementation for mod security, send that to the web hosts, and
So you're actually sending firewall rules to web hosts in addition to patching Joomla and getting that patch out. That is really cool.
And that firewall rules, those are sent right at the moment where the patch is released. We don't do it up front because that obviously would massively broaden the number of people that know about the exploit and the issue, because a proper firewall rule is like the readme.txt in order to exploit stuff. That was a good thing that we did, and I think we as core security teams, we are in a unique position in some way when it comes to this sort of service, because we are the very first who know about the issues, and normally we know our applications pretty well. That's a big advantage compared to generic web providers, because those give their best to provide a patch that doesn't break nothing legit. But we as people who really know the application, we can write rules that have far less false positives than the commercial rule sets.
Cool.
So that's working quite well.
Yeah, no, interesting. We release firewall rules in real time to our premium customers, and we will use hashing to obfuscate rules so that they can't be reverse engineered. So it's kind of something that we have to think about as well. But yeah, no, cool. If you look at the WordPress security space right now, kind of looking at it from the Joomla side, do you see anything that you think that WordPress could improve?
What really annoyed me in the last maybe year or year and a half was how the automatic update server or the security issues around that update server were treated. I think until the very last release, WordPress automatic updates were just plain applied from whatever that update server, that central instance delivered. And now only the recent release applied some proper cryptographic signature checks on top of it. And I don't get it why it took 1.5 years, because if you think about it, that update server, that was the one single kill switch for a third of the internet. And I really don't get it why this had much more priority. And as an outsider's impression, it seems to me that response times to researchers tend to be a bit longer than in the industry average, to put it nicely. I got some feedback from researchers that indicate some frustration. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, interesting. So, to kind of give our listeners some background, in fact, I was chatting with, I think, Rand Dewhurst, who I interviewed a couple days ago about this earlier today, that I guess Matt Barry from our team did that research where he found a weak caching algorithm, and it was Adler32 that was being used on the WordPress infrastructure, and that would potentially have allowed a compromise of that infrastructure. And that kind of like highlighted that's vulnerable to a supply chain attack, which would allow an attacker to get in there and then release a malicious version of WordPress out to everyone else. And then Scott Arsazuski ran with it, and he kind of pointed to Matt's research that we published and said, we need to implement cryptographic authentication of releases, right? So basically the core developers have a public and private key pair. They sign the release with their private key, everyone else has the public key, and they can verify that it's actually the core developers that put that release out. And so that's now been implemented in fairly recently, right? It's the last 2 months, something like that. And I guess it's a soft fail at this point for WordPress. In other words, it'll just warn you if the signing doesn't match. Ultimately, that'll become a hard fail. And I'm really just sharing this for the users out there who are listening to this. I know you already know this. Obviously, it's something you think about a lot. But does Joomla implement something like that at this point?
Not at this point, but it's on the schedule for the upcoming major release, Joomla 4. That was the major thing that actually held us back implementing auto updates in Joomla 3. the need for strong cryptographic signatures on such a service, because otherwise, yeah, it's suicide. And no matter how much effort you put into securing such an infrastructure, there are a gazillion examples within the IT security where such supply chain attacks happen. So it's a must-have.
Yeah, interesting. Well, very cool. David, if folks want to report issues to the Joomla team, how do they do that?
There are different channels. The easiest channel probably is just an email to security@joomla.org. We'll shortly also launch our small but still present bug bounty program on HackerOne. That would be the alternative. There's also a form on joomla.org where you can report stuff. security.joomla.org is an URL, also links to that form. So lots and lots of ways to report stuff. We have a PGP key pair if you want to report stuff encrypted. That's also fine. Side note, one could think that the security researcher industry is so security aware that they're encrypting the shit out of the things that they send. And actually the rate of encrypted reports is about 10% max. All the rest is just plain text, which scares the shit out of me.
So we make a lot of noise about cryptography, but we don't use it ourselves, it turns out.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Yeah, that's good fun.
That's funny. And if they want to find you, are you on Twitter or anything like that?
You can find me on Twitter using my nickname, which is @SniperSister. Don't ask why, it's just the nickname. You can find me at one of the upcoming Joomla events like Joomla Day Germany in Gießen, the Joomla World Conference that's going to happen in London in November this year, and at a number of other CMS events actually, because I'm part of CMS Jardin, which is a non-profit association based in Germany, where we try to team up open source CMS communities and have some exchange between those communities, and that's why I'm actually hanging around here.
Yeah. So I saw your booth here at
Exactly.
WordCamp EU in Berlin, and great. All right. Well, David, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Hope you enjoyed the conversation Mark had with David Jardin. Even though David works in the Joomla space and most of us are working with WordPress, there are things that these distinct and different, but yet open source content management systems can still learn from each other. And as we all work in the same open source communities, we can all learn and grow and help everyone stay safe online. If you'd like to follow David on Twitter, you can find him @SniperSister. We'll create a link on the show notes. Thanks so much for watching.